Night shift workers of Reddit, what is your scariest experience while working? Taking my first deceased patient to the hospital morgue in the middle of the night. It's in the basement and getting to the morgue wasn't straightforward. There's a lot of turns and dimly lit hallways. At the time the morgue was being renovated. I was freaking out BC there was no room left in the morgue and there was an unattended occupied stretcher in the doorway. Worked overnight in a very old but still functional hospital. The building was in disrepair but still had patients and staff. We were installing gigabit Ethernet to the top floors and corners so they could put a data center up there. I was up in a remote comms cupboard around 1 a.m. The only other people in the building were nursing staff and patients who were locked in the wards downstairs. So I am busy clearing out this old comms cupboard when the door behind me shut. It was wedged open with a fire extinguisher. I didn't hear anything or see anyone. I switched my phone torch on and opened the door and the fire extinguisher was gone. It must have taken me 5 seconds to turn on my torch and leave the room. The corridor the room was on was long, probably a few hundred feet in each direction. Only a few doors off the corridor into old patient rooms. I tried every door, locked. I couldn't find the fire extinguisher either. I checked in the room, behind the door, in the bins. So I went down to the security office and reported the incident, suggesting there may be somebody unauthorized loose in the building. They played the CCTV back along the corridor and sure enough, some guy dressed all in black with bare feet just walks up silently to the cupboard I am in and grabs the fire extinguisher and legs it down the corridor extremely quickly. The security dudes flew into action, but the guy was never caught a fake. The summer between high school and college I worked at a grocery store that was near several 24/7 factories. We stayed open until after the lunch shift for the late night crew. There were also some townhouses near there that had been turned into sort of a halfway house kind of setup. My job was to stay up front and check people out while the stocking team replenished shelves. They do their best to keep an eye on me and help me feel safe up there on my own, but I was still kinda exposed a lot of the time. This lady from the halfway house got a job at one of them plants and she would come in to buy a Red Bull and Long John donut for her lunch break. She would flirt with me a few times until I shut her down as gently as I could. She seemed to take it okay. But then the stock team started bringing me all this weird shit they were finding in the shelves when she'd come in. She kept trying to hide these little love notes. One time there was one of those cheap teddy bears with a heart, etc. It was always the same. I know you like me and you're just playing. I like you too, but I'm not playing. The whole thing was weird and creepy, but I left for school soon enough anyway. What made it scary is that I later found out she'd been in prison for murdering her roommate. I no longer work night shift, but I did briefly work nights at a gas station by my home. One of our regulars was a younger guy. I believed he was homeless because he would come in numerous times a day and numerous times per shift, so I think he came in about 10 to 12 times a day and would often just stand around talking to staff and rarely ever purchased anything unless it was something small. For the most part he seemed harmless. He came in more than once while I worked alone at night and would just chat with me. He had a lot going on, but he was always incredibly polite and never stole, so I wasn't bothered by him. I'd give him free drinks from the fountain. These were free drinks the company gave me, but I only drink water so I never took advantage. And I would let him dress up frozen yogurt samples with candy. Truly the only thing I did that was against the rules, but I didn't do it often enough for anyone to care. One night he came in while a training manager was visiting. Because that manager was training she was in the back with my manager and they were in the cooler where you can really hear much of what's up front. I was alone on the floor. He comes in and per usual chats with me. I give him a drink and some frozen yogurt and we chat a few minutes. He starts venting about how badly things are going for him and how badly he's been feeling lately. He then pulls a butterfly knife from his bag. He starts talking about hurting or killing himself. Scared the crap out of me. I talked him down as best I could and sent him on his way. Management had a piss poor response to the whole thing. I hope that man is okay wherever he is these days. When I was 18 I was working as kitchen porter in a hotel restaurant nightclub complex that had been converted from a nun's convent. One night I was minding my own business and mopping a floor when I felt I was being watched. I turned, thinking it was a coworker about to startle me. They were a pretty pranksy lot, but there was no one there. Shortly after I was walking from the kitchen to the scullery. The walls zigzagged briefly, and you had to walk momentarily at 90 degrees to your destination, and it looked out of the corner of my eye, as if someone was standing in the opening of the alcove where the dishwasher was. Amused, I walked into the scullery and turned the corner, looking into the alcove recess, and there was no one there. I mentioned it in passing to my colleague, a man of about pensionable age. He has since passed, love you, Sandy, and he related that the building was hundreds of years old and is haunted as fuck. One night, the manageress, a very no-nonsense woman who was as steady as they came, was walking down a converted old spiral staircase after locking up the restaurant when a woman in black hurried up the stairs, past her and round the corner out of sight. The manageress shouted up to her that the restaurant bar was locked and she'd have to go to one that was open and climbed back up the stairs to find no one there at the top of the stairs and the restaurant door still thoroughly locked. She got the bouncers to check the restaurant for an intruder, wondering if they'd somehow managed to steal a spare set of keys, but no one was found. Another night, a barmaid was finishing her shift and reached out to touch a switch when she felt a slap on the back of her hand. Terrified, she reported it to the manageress, who intuitively had the switch examined. It turns out it had shorted, and if the barmaid had touched it, she'd have received a nasty electric shock. Years later, while working as a barman in a completely different business, I met a young lady who had worked at my old hotel as a waitress. She said that she had climbed that spiral staircase and saw a woman looking at her from behind a perspex screen that was used to make sure no one threw anything out of the old arrowslit in the staircase's wall. Perplexed, she asked the staff in the restaurant who the woman was, but when they investigated, there was no one there and no apparent means for her to get there. I was 6'1" at the time, 19 years old, and filling out. There wasn't much that scared me, but mopping floors in the place could be very unsettling. One of my least favorite parts of that job was to go from the main kitchen through the staff door into the nightclub to retrieve something for the chefs from the smaller kitchen next door. It was a bit of a trip, and most of it was done in the dark, lit mainly by green exit signs and an emergency light here and there. Walking through that dark, cavernous nightclub when it was empty and quiet, I have experienced graveyards that were far less creepy. I'm 48 now and I still feel a shiver when I think of that place. I worked at an overnight shelter for men. It was in a church that had a connected hall. I would sit in the hallway when the guests were asleep, usually just reading a book, keeping an eye on things. One of the guests got up in the middle of the night. Nothing unusual, I thought he just got up to use the bathroom. Instead, he made a beeline up the stairs into the bell tower. I followed and tried to talk to him, but he was sleepwalking and catatonic. He went into a room at the top of the stairs used for storage. A bunch of old desks and overhead projectors, that sort of thing. He starts climbing over all the furniture and tries to open the window like he's going to try and jump out. He's saying "Yay, Sergeant, no Sergeant" when I'm asking him what he's doing, trying to get him to go back the way he came. Eventually, I'm able to coax him back downstairs and into bed. But he's completely out of it. He wet himself, and I ended up calling an ambulance to take him to the ER to make sure he stayed safe. What was creepy was the year before, a guest jumped out that some window and killed herself. She was suicidal and in really bad sorts with addiction and whatnot. I didn't work there at the time, but obviously was aware that it had happened. What pissed me off was no one had thought to padlock the door, the fact that it remained open. I never went up there because there was no reason for me to. But I was kicking myself still. Anyways, what freaked me out was the drawing sense this window had to this gentleman. He was in the army before, so the mutterings seemed like flashbacks. But he had not been in the shelter the year before, so while he may have known the story, I know he hadn't had contact with the deceased woman or was around when it happened. It was an old church not in the best condition. Part of our job was to walk around through the building with a flashlight to make sure there were no fires because it wasn't up to code. Shit was creepy enough. But that bell tower. Safe to say, the next night we got a padlock for that door. I'll preface this that I genuinely am not a superstitious person at all. I used to work overnights alone in a group home to pay for college. Just me. 5'3" female college student and 12 kids between ages 12 and 18. There was one other staff member from day shift usually physically present for ratios, but they were asleep and locked in an upstairs bedroom. It was pretty quiet work most of the time, and I could get homework done during the wee hours, which was pretty handy. The house was donated to the agency because the family who had lived there didn't want it anymore, for some reason my boss wouldn't go into. Part of my overnight routine was to go down to the basement and finish up any laundry the boys hadn't finished during the day. Frankly, just being involved with a laundry of 12 adolescent boys was scary enough to warrant a story here. Anyway, there was a walk-in supply cupboard down there where we kept detergent, etc., so sometimes I'd have to go in and pick up some soap, etc. The storage area had its own light, but the basement as a whole just had a single bulb hanging over the washers. So coming out from the comparatively bright storage into the dark basement was always a little creepy. Multiple times I saw what I can only say looked and felt like someone in white rushing past out the corner of my eye while bending into the washers fishing out clothes. It was particularly in one corner of the basement and had a very negative energy to it. Each time I would flip out and book it upstairs, locking the basement behind me. I felt stupid about this but really couldn't stop myself. When later I finally explained it to my boss, when telling him why I really wanted to stay out of the basement, he confirmed that the family had donated the house because their father had hanged himself from a beam in that exact corner. Well, it's not night be real early morning. One night my girlfriend at the time woke me up in the middle of the night because I like some girl's picture. Someone I knew in high school's business page. I always try to support friends' business by liking or sharing their page. She continued to argue with me all night, knowing it had work early in the morning. At the time I was driving for city transit. So it's finally time for work and I got maybe 2 hours of sleep at most. I get there and I'm super tired. I probably should have called off, but I needed the hours. So I blasted down some energy drinks and started my day. There are two sides of the route. The side I started on, it only took like 30 minutes to get to downtown, so I get into downtown and I'm picking up people, then I realize I'm at the other end of the line. And some guy is getting off my bus saying thank you for getting him where he needed to go very fast and I did an excellent job at driving. Mind you, I don't remember picking up this guy at all, and from downtown to the other side's end of the line was a 2-hour ride. I had 2 hours of unaccounted time go by. I was so scared because I couldn't remember any of it. For all I know, anything could have happened. I got to the end of the line and called the dispatcher and let them know I was feeling real sick and needed a relive. About 45 minutes later someone relived me and I went home with my heart still racing. I never drove sleep deprivation again. A scary lesson learned, and thankfully I didn't hurt no one and hit anything. On my way to work at a 24-hour deli. I'm driving my father's yellow Corvette. It's like 3 a.m. on a back road 1 hour north of New York City. I see an older square headlight Ford dually pickup truck in front of me. Maybe I was following close. I don't think so. It definitely wasn't grounds for what was about to happen. As I get behind the truck he pulls off to the right and lets me by. I go past him and pick it up a little, but it's rainy and the roads are wet. Well, this guy is on my tail. I speed up a little more and he sticks with me. What the fuck? I make a turn into another road in a quick way without a blinker and step on it. The dude follows me. I can hear this diesel truck is fast and I look in the rear mirror and he burning out drifting sideways to keep up with me. I spend 5 minutes on a windy road trying to lose this truck, but unbelievably he is keeping up with me. I'm coming to a red light. I blow through it at 80 miles per hour and he does the same. I tried pulling over to see if he would go by, but he pulls up alongside and tries to stop, so I get the gas and take off. It's 3 a.m. and this is so fucking crazy that I'm being chased, but it gets even better. He's still chasing me. I'm doing 80 to 90 miles per hour on back roads and he's keeping up. Had it not been raining I would have easily lost him, but Corvettes don't corner well in the rain. I've run from the police on my dirt bike when I was a kid, so I knew not to get worked up or drive above my driving level to get away. I go through some more red lights and so does he. I'm not sure what to do now. I'm not going to work with someone chasing me. I want to get away from them. So I decide to call the police in my town. I explain it to them while still being chased by this guy. I explained where I was and they said, oh, that's not our jurisdiction. Well, it will be in a minute because I'm coming to the police station. Mind you, at this point I'm doing close to 100 miles per hour and I put a little gap on him, but he can still see me. I turn on the road with the police station and so does he. I pull in the police station and he follows in right behind me. I start to pull in front and a police officer that's sitting in their cruiser and the pull in between me and the truck and block the truck. I'm sitting in my car not sure what's gonna happen. If I'm gonna have to take off or what. The truck revs his engine a few times and then just takes off. The cops don't care, they don't go after him. One officer comes out of the station and the other one out of the cruiser. I start taking with them. I ask why they didn't go after him. Their answer. Who? They told me they didn't see the truck. I couldn't fucking believe it. They didn't want to help me or do anything. When I told them I was worried to go anywhere for fear of being chased again, they didn't care. They were complete assholes. I went home and was shaken up a bit and kept an eye on the driveway, worried this psycho was completely might come back for more, but he didn't. That was the end of it. My guess is that it was an undercover police officer that was chasing me for whatever crazy reason to begin with, and that's why the police said they didn't see him. Working overnight at a grocery store, had someone wait outside after we closed. He sat in his car. Everyone had noticed him. I asked if someone could walk me to my car so I could go around to Whataburger for everyone, and nobody would. So I went alone. I noticed the man in the car started to follow me out of the parking lot, so instead of going up Whataburger, I went across the street to Little Caesars, because right next to it was a sheriff's substation and I remember them telling us at night if anything weird happened to call across the street because they'd be there. He pulled in next to me. I jumped out my passenger seat and ran into the substation, and that's when I think he realized where in fact he was, and he booked us out of there. I do not know what would have happened if I did not notice him there. Working overnight at a club, 10 years later. Bouncer walks me to car. As I'm pulling out I notice the parking lot across the street has a Vic in it and the lights have turned on. I pull out onto the main street to head to the 17. Lived in Phoenix, and this car pulls out after me. He follows me onto I-17. I deliberately went south instead of north, and he followed. I made a last-minute change onto the 101 ramp by cutting across a few lanes, a dick move, but there was no traffic, and saw him do the same. So me an actual fucking massacre. Seriously, it was loud as shit, annoying to drive. Don't turn your daily driver into your project, just hit the loop and dusted him. He couldn't keep up. I got too far ahead, jumped off on Cave Creek, flipped a bitch and ran back down the other side of the 101 before he'd even figured out what exit I was on. Texted my bouncer when I got home and gave him Desk a Vic, and sure as fucking shit it was a dude who had been cut off and gotten kicked out for being really gross to the girls. Third time was stupid. Staff duty 8 years later, somehow still in Arizona, but this time way down south. It snowed. This was just last year. Walking in the dark to do building checks and hear dogs from base housing going nuts in a row. So okay, it's probably a coyote. I'm sure it'll leave me alone. Round the corner of the building to go check the back, and it's not a coyote, it's a javelina. The fucking meanest animals on the planet. Like an Oscar fish except it's a wild pig. And she has her babies with her. When I tell you that's the fastest I've run in my entire career. Bruh. Not so much creepy as downright scary. My whole ass life flashed before my eyes as I ran across that icy parking lot. Didn't even look back. Fuck all of that. This took place like 3 years ago when I was working a retail job at a Big 5 sporting goods. If you aren't from an area that has one, it's basically discounted sporting goods that were used or not sold at other stores. Nothing that expensive minus the guns behind gun counter, treadmills, and punching bags. If you saw my other story, I didn't live in a great area. Well, on a later shift. Around 10 p.m., right before close, a group of 5 males walked into the store. 3 were probably in high school, while the other 2 were easily mid-20s. No big deal, I just want to go home, but okay. They instantly split to different ends of the store. I had seen this before and knew they were up to something. One came up to me and started asking about some football gloves, while the others started grabbing shoes and hoodies and such. He was trying to distract me. My manager cut him off and pulled me aside. "Go to the front," he said. So I did. My manager was a young woman, 5'3", and like 110 pounds sopping wet. Yet, she still tried to stop these guys from bolting out of the store once they realized that we knew what was going on. One of them absolutely trucked her. They both fell to the floor, clothes everywhere. Now, I was not risking a fight for a bunch of discount clothes, but I adored my manager and was somewhat protective of her. We had been friends a while. So when they made it to the door, I kind of shoulder checked one of them while he was running. I'm a muscular, stocky guy. So naturally, he went a little airborne and hit the door. His buddies ran past him, arms full. Me and the guy who I just body checked locked eyes. After that, it was slow motion. He pulled up his waistband and gripped the handle of a handgun that was concealed the whole time. I froze, he pulled it out and stood there for a sec. Just giving me the coldest look. His buddies yelled at him to get going, and just like that, he put it away and started running back towards his group. My manager was a mess. Thankfully, nothing was broken. I wasn't sure at the time. She had hit her head pretty hard and ended up with a concussion. Her nose was bleeding. I picked her up and she was bawling. I called 911 and told them we need a paramedic because I didn't know the extent of what her injuries were and reported that the store had been robbed by a group who was armed. Waited for the paramedics and just tried to calm my manager down. Eventually they came and she ended up being pretty okay all things considered. The cops took our statements and informed us they had hit 2 other Big 5s. Literally the next day, they tried to hit another and got caught. Guys were obviously not the sharpest tools in the shed, but they certainly made my life flash before my eyes. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please drop a like, and to stay up to date with my latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the button under this video.